Welcome to today's CrittendenPress News Talk, and we have as our guest today Representative Lynn Beckler, a two-term Kentucky House of Representatives member in the state of Kentucky, and United States Bankruptcy Judge Alan Stout. We have a lot of interesting topics today to discuss, particularly with bankruptcy even being in the news the last couple of days. I am Chris Evans, your ghost host. You'll hear me, but you won't see me on the show today. And most of our staff is out with COVID. That's why, because of the COVID scare. So we have a small staff. I'll be behind the camera today. We're brought to you today by Frazier and Massey Law Firm in Marion, Kentucky. Bart Frazier and Roy Massey, their office on Main Street in Marion, right on the corner there next to both the banks. They've been in practice here for a number of years, and they're general practice attorneys focusing on probate, bankruptcy, and real estate. And we're going to begin our discussion today with Representative Beckler. Representative, your colleague in the General Assembly, Senator Robbie Mills, wrote a column that was published this week in the CrittendenPress, and basically he said it was time to get back to work. And now we hear the governor has begun to allow some of the so-called non-essentials to get back to reopening as early as Monday. Many of those in the healthcare sector. But how much longer can we keep everything else shut down? Do you see us gradually getting to opening up a number of other type of businesses?
I think, first of all, thanks for having me. And today was really a good day because I was out working on fencing in a pasture, and I needed
a break.
I needed to sit down. Thank you very much. With regard to opening the state back up, I think we really have to. I believe that we could actually do it kind of by section. If you take a look at our part of the Commonwealth, very little problem down here, and I think that it is quite different than Lexington or Northern Kentucky, etc. And so I think the problems that we might face are substantially different than they might face. I think we have to go ahead and start opening things up. I was looking at the news yesterday, as a matter of fact, and 21 states have announced that they're going to start officially opening their respective states up by the end of the month. And I was disappointed that Kentucky wasn't one of those 21. In addition to those 21, there are several other states that never really shut down. Now, granted, they were out further west, and that gets to my point about the region. They're out in an area where there may be somebody every 2 miles or a family every 2 miles. We're certainly not like that, but we're rather spread out, and I think we're pretty smart about it. I mean, if you take a look at the places that are currently open, I see people doing the social distancing, which is a phrase I'd never heard before, on their own. You see masks, you see gloves, etc. So I think that we're smart enough to figure it out. I think that the individual businesses, the entrepreneurial feelings that they have, they're pretty good out in our part of the country. The country as a whole, but especially in our little area out here. So I think we ought to start opening it up. I actually think that we were closed down too long, and while the governor has listed some phases and things that have to go on in the various phases to open back up, a lot of them are somewhat ambiguous and are in, basically he'll make the decision whether or not we've met the targets that he set. I'm very happy to see that the chiropractors are getting to open up again. I probably had more people complain to me about chiropractors than any other thing that's been closed. I say that also knowing that I've had a lot of people talk to me about not getting their unemployment checks, which is a whole other story. But from an individual point, or companies being closed. The chiropractors are the one that down here really did it. When we talk about essential businesses, I think maybe we were a bit too restrictive. For example, a knee replacement is considered elective surgery, but to somebody who needs a knee replaced, it can put that individual in a wheelchair. And it's well known that if you're in a wheelchair, it's harder to maintain your health. And if you can't maintain your health, we're heading down the path where something else can happen. And the other thing that I think was a mistake was saying we have to stay inside. The sun and a lot of the information is coming out now that heat and humidity tend to kill the virus. Sunshine's a lot better. If you stay indoors, the air's not nearly as good. So I think that the governor had to do some things. I support the fact that it is an emergency and action needed to be taken, but I think it was a little overboard.
Well, and as we know, the longer this stretches out, it puts more pressure, obviously, on the small businesses, those people who are going out who work paycheck to paycheck. But it also puts a great deal of pressure on governments, city governments, county governments, state governments, even the federal government, which is sending out all these lucrative checks nowadays. And I want to get to a point with Judge Stout. Judge Stout is, of course, a Marion native, and he is U.S. bankruptcy judge with the Western District of Kentucky. And, this is likely a bit of political posturing, Judge Stout, but our very own Senator Mitch McConnell, the U.S. Majority Leader in the Senate, yesterday advocated to some degree that maybe states should start looking at bankruptcy if they get into a bind in the coming days and months financially over this, rather than holding out their hand for a handout from the federal government. It's an interesting thought. And again, whether it's hypothetical or not, as we know, Senator McConnell doesn't say much without a good measure of thought with it. So
he puts a lot of thought into it. Yeah. But yes, I will say that when he gave that interview to Hugh Hewitt, it sent shockwaves through the bankruptcy community. I'm on various forums, being the chief bankruptcy judge. I'm on various forums with chief bankruptcy judges around the country, and I was on a conference call today, in fact, and that sent shockwaves literally through the bankruptcy community. Now, what he's talking about, though, loosely alluding to, is there is a provision in the bankruptcy code called Chapter 9. And Chapter 9 is specifically designed for municipalities and governmental entities to seek protection under the bankruptcy code. One of the most famous ones more recently was the city of Detroit, which reorganized under Chapter 9 and was quite successful. We've even had one filed in Kentucky, a small town outside of Louisville, right on the Bullitt County border, filed a Chapter 9 bankruptcy called Hillview. And I was appointed judge on that case and presided over it.
that's not recently as a result of this, though.
This was before this crisis. It was a situation where a town had a very large judgment rendered against it, and it sought protection under Chapter 9. And that's what it's designed for. There's been county hospitals who have sought protection under it, and it's designed for governmental entities. There's never been a state file for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, and it would obviously push the system to the limits.
Mm-hmm. And certainly the reverberations throughout the bond market would not be very good, and through the broader market as well.
We often refer to the domino effect. If a very large entity files for bankruptcy, it causes a ripple effect among all the vendors and the service industries that are affiliated with it. And obviously the domino effect of a state or a very large municipality filing Chapter 9 would be huge.
And I've done just a little bit of reading on this. If it were to come to pass, say in any state or Kentucky, hypothetically you could talk about Kentucky. In that case, you might even be the sitting judge for that. And if Kentucky filed for bankruptcy, then the bankruptcy judge oversees the budgetary process, kind of would take that away from your general assemblyman here, and then you could even force a state to raise taxes. So it would be getting into some pretty muddy water, wouldn't
There
it?
would definitely be uncharted territory and all kinds of constitutional questions, separation of powers and things like that.
Yeah. So as we said, it's probably just some measured shot by Senator McConnell. I can't see states starting to file for bankruptcy, but Representative Beckler, you tell. I mean, can Kentucky get to the point where this is a serious matter? When will that be, or are we there?
I wouldn't say we're there yet, but yet it definitely is a serious matter. As Judge Stott alluded to, I think there's some very serious constitutional issues. I don't know if we can actually file bankruptcy. I've never looked up bankruptcy in the Kentucky Constitution, and nor have I looked it up in the U.S. Constitution, but my sense is there are some constitutional issues there. We certainly are in financial peril right now, as I'm sure you know, and Judge Stott knows, and everybody's watching knows. We took the unprecedented step this past session to only pass a one-year budget. And the way the General Assembly comes up with a budget is, first of all, revenue has to equal, you can't appropriate more than the revenue you're projected to receive. And there's a group, it's called the Consensus Forecasted Group. It is a number of financial people who get together, and they do it periodically, and before we pass a budget, they come up with a number and says, all right, optimistically, this is the number we're going to get through tax revenue. This is probably more realistic, and this is pessimistic. When we initially passed the budget out of the House of Representatives, we took the realistic view. And then after all of this crisis hit, then we had to back off to the pessimistic view. And that took us down about $150 million or so in terms of our anticipated revenue. So I don't think we're at the point now where we would consider declaring bankruptcy. I find it hard to believe we'd ever get there. I think that there are many things that we could try to do. We could, you know, I'm a big proponent of cutting spending before raising taxes anyway. And I think that we could get to the point where we're just really going to have to start cutting expenses and cut. You know, get into the meat of things.
You know, but one of the things that overshadows a lot of this is the fact that we had this pension crisis going on before this even hit.
Absolutely.
And so trying to struggle to deal with that, and then this on top of it, and when you see that spike of the unemployment benefits of where they're running in Kentucky, and then all of a sudden they shoot up so just a straight line, that creates all kinds of issues.
And of course, Representative Beckler alluded to this a bit earlier, we would probably have many more claims if folks could get through on the phone lines. Again, that's the biggest thing I hear around town. Yeah, I'm still trying to apply for my unemployment, and a lot of people still have not been able to do that.
Right.
And obviously that period of time when people are unemployed, individuals, that puts them under financial stress, as well as small businesses.
As far as a state goes, Representative Beckler, what would be in your forecast the first real place we could get into trouble from this? Is it from the lack of sales tax? Because many of the businesses that we've shut down are ones that generate the sales tax. And is there anything particular that comes to mind to you first?
Well, I think sales tax is obviously it. I think that real estate taxes, people aren't going to have money to pay real estate taxes, which is, you know, if they don't have enough money to pay real estate taxes, and you have foreclosures and bankruptcy, et cetera, et cetera. Fuel tax, people We haven't seen it yet, or at least I haven't seen it. I'm anxious to find out what the next report is. But people are still using fuel right now. But I can see if they don't have money to drive and go somewhere, to run their generators, to do the tractors, I can see that being a hit. I do find it interesting that we've left the lottery open. Trying to get money there, you know. With starting to hopefully open up, and I'm hoping the sales tax will come back up, but I think that'll be the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Vehicle tax too, by the way.
I'll remind our viewers today that our broadcast is brought to you by Frazier and Matt Firm in Marion, Kentucky. They're on Main Street, right across from the banks here in the middle of town. General practice attorneys. They focus on probate, bankruptcy, and real estate. That's Frazier and Massey Law Firm in Marion, Kentucky. Judge Stout, we talk about some of the issues that could face the states. What about individuals and businesses? I know in your court you deal with all sorts of bankruptcy. Assume that individual and business are and with the current. I guess you're getting ready for an influx.
There is predicting both individual consumer bankruptcies and business bankruptcies as well. The unemployment situation is going to cause people to get behind. Now, I will say we're seeing a lot of lenders are doing what's called forbearance, where they're agreeing not to foreclose. They're agreeing to allow people to have periods of time when they're suspending mortgage payments. But still people are getting behind, and that leads to situations where individuals and small businesses, the small and many times medical bills and uninsured medical expenses. And as people start getting behind, then start getting to the point where they're in default on loans or defaults to the lenders, then at that point in time, they probably need to talk to an attorney, because if then they get sued and have a lawsuit filed against them and ultimately a judgment rendered against them, that's what forces many of them into a bankruptcy, because when a judgment's rendered against an individual, that's when they can have their wages garnished, judgment rendered against an individual, or the foreclosure of their home. Then that is where they have to seek some type of protection under the bankruptcy code to stop the garnishments or to stop the foreclosure on the home. One of the most important functions of the bankruptcy code, and one of the most powerful tools of the bankruptcy code, is what's called the automatic stay. And if an individual is sued and they're about to have their wages garnished, or they're about to have the home sold at the courthouse through a master commissioner sale, then the bankruptcy automatic stay stops all collection efforts by any creditor until they seek permission from the court. So that's one of the most powerful aspects of bankruptcy.
So let me circle back just a minute, kind of tighten this up, wrap it up. As an individual, at what point should family and they start to get in financial trouble through this crisis? What's the key for them to say, hey, I might need to start thinking about bankruptcy?
Well, I think the first thing now they should do is contact their lenders. And if they're getting behind on their payments, if they're going to have to skip some payments, we're finding that many lenders are working with individuals and couples, especially when it comes to their residents. And some of the major banks across the country are putting in forbearance programs that will allow people to forego their payments during this period of time. So the first thing people should do is contact their lender. The creditors are having trouble paying, and many of these creditors are giving breaks to people now. If, however, to the point where the lender declares that they're in default and a lawsuit's filed, then they need to seek counsel to seek the protections that can be provided.
Well, I'll remind you that we have here in Marion, Kentucky, Frazier and Massey Law Firm, and one of the focuses of that firm is bankruptcy. They also handle a good bit of probate and real estate. They are general practicing attorneys, Marion, Kentucky, Frazier and Massey Law Firm, and they are sponsoring today's broadcast. I'm going to come back, give you guys an opportunity to kind of wrap things up today. You know, we start the show at 3:30, and if we go to 4 o'clock, we get into Andy's time. We get into the governor's comes on at 4, and our ratings go way down, so we have to wrap it up before then. Representative Beckler, anything you would like to say in conclusion today?
I will address the crisis we're in and some of the restrictions. I find it appalling that abortion clinics are considered an essential in Kentucky. From April 1st to Easter, I forget roughly speaking, there have been about 4 times as many abortions to Easter during this crisis as there have been deaths from COVID. And I say that as a pro-lifer, but I also say it because that the abortion clinics are considered medical, and you know, if we're shutting down hospitals, which of course, you know, we're losing people across the state, University of Kentucky, just because of the lack of people in there coming into hospitals for other than COVID stuff, is laying off, I think, about 1,700 people. And so I just think that's been a real big thorn in my side.
Judge Stout, anything in particular you would like to conclude with?
Let me just touch on a couple things. First, let me say, as far as our court system itself, the federal courts, we're moving, the bankruptcy courts especially, are moving our cases along very well. We had what's called electronic case filing in place, and we've had it in place for many years. And so that's allowed us to continue the cases moving along or getting filed. Our employees had in place protocols for teleworking, and they were already teleworking 1 or 2 days a week, and then they are now working full-time teleworking. The biggest change we've had is that we're now conducting our hearings telephonically, where the people do not come to court. The federal courthouse in Louisville is basically closed, but we're able to conduct these hearings telephonically. So we're being able to move our cases along really well. And it's very important that we do that because we don't want to develop a backlog, because we think it's inevitable that there's going to be this surge. I know I touched a little bit on the consumer bankruptcy side of things, but I think it's inevitable that we're going to see a number of businesses, large and small, are going to get into the situation where they're going to have to seek protection under Chapter 11 of the Bankruptcy Code simply because of the pressures on them from being shut down for as long as they have been.
All right, gentlemen, we appreciate Representative Beckler and Judge Stout for being here today, and would remind our viewers that you can get all of your local news in the CrittendenPress and at the CrittendenPress online. Again, thank you, Judge, and thank you, Representative Beckler, and we're glad to have you here in Marion, and the fact that the two of you aren't, I know both of you spend time up in the central part of the state, in Frankfort and in Louisville with the judge, and I'm sure that you're down here in what we like to say is God's country, where I like to say too is we were social distancing when social distancing wasn't cool, and
the density is much better in Clinton County than it is in Louisville and Jefferson.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Representative, for giving up your time fencing today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, gentlemen.